It's election time, and across Kansas, voters have a number of races to consider. Some are high profile, others can leave voters puzzled. So, how do you decide who to vote for when it comes to district court judge races? Oftentimes the names are unfamiliar, and so are important issues at stake. Tonight, we bring together candidates for the 3 contested judicial races in Sedgwick County. They'll answer questions related to how they would preside in court cases that can have life and death consequences and impact the safety and fairness of our communities. Whether these are the candidates on your ballot or not, the issues at stake are similar in judicial races across Kansas. Join us now to learn more in this Sedgwick County District Judges Forum from the KPTS Channel 8 studio.
Martin Pringle Attorneys at Law is a proud supporter of the Wichita Women's Attorneys Association, the League of Women's Voters, and KPTS as hosts of the Judicial Candidate Forum, a community event with the goal of introducing judicial candidates and informing Sedgwick County voters. Also made possible by Hite, Fanning and Honeyman LLP, business-minded and trial-ready attorneys with decades of success. This candidate forum was initiated and planned with the help of the Wichita Women's Attorneys Association and the League of Women Voters, Wichita Metro.
Thank you for joining us. I'm your host, Chris Frank. Some political races always get more attention than others. But when it comes to voting for district court judges, few of us ever know much about the candidates or the issues at stake. Tonight, we thought we'd try to remedy the situation by bringing in the candidates running in the contested judicial races right here in Sedgwick County. We'll ask each of them questions that were provided by the Wichita Women Attorneys Association, which helped organize this forum here in the KPTS Channel 8 studio. Now, if you live in another county, you will have other candidates to consider, but the issues will be largely the same, and we think you'll find this interesting. First off, before we get to the questions, let's give each candidate, a minute to introduce themselves. So let's start on my left and move to each candidate. Mr. Pittman?
My name's Quentin Pittman. I'm an attorney in private practice in Sedgwick County, and I'd like to thank Chris and everybody here for having us here tonight. I practiced law in Sedgwick County for the last 18 years. I graduated from Washburn Law, and I'd appreciate your vote in the upcoming election.
Monique?
Hello, my name is Judge Monique Centeno. I'm a district court judge. My division is Division 11. I was appointed to the bench last year by Governor Kelly. Currently, I'm in the family law department, and I hear divorces and child custody, division of property, anything that has to do with divorces. And I'm asking for your vote.
And Mr. Thompson, James Thompson?
Thank you very much, sir. I appreciate it. Thank you all for having us here tonight. My name's James Thompson. I'm running for judge in Division 25. I'm a husband, a father, an Army veteran, and a civil rights attorney. I've been practicing here in Wichita for 17 years. I've sworn twice in my life to uphold and defend the Constitution, once in the military and then once again in 2003 when I became an attorney. If you believe in the Constitution, if you believe that our judges need to make sure that we are upholding the Constitution, I'm asking for your vote on November 3rd. Thank you very much, everybody, and James Thompson, Division 25.
Judge John Hatfield?
Well, thank you to the Wichita Women Attorneys Association and the League of Women Voters, Hite, Fanning, Martin Pringle, and of course to KPTS for hosting this important and supporting this important judicial candidate forum. My name is Judge Sean Hatfield. I am the incumbent district court judge in Division 25, and I'm asking for your vote in this campaign to continue serving the citizens of Sedgwick County and the citizens of our great state as a district court judge.
Okay, now for position 1, we have challenger Joni Cole.
Hi, I'm Joni Cole. I am running for Division 1, and I'm also asking for your vote, and I also extend my gratitude to the League of Women Voters and the Wichita Women's Attorneys Association for putting this on tonight under these crazy times we're living in. I've been an attorney for 16 years. I've practiced in over 24 different jurisdictions in over 30 different areas of law. I currently work for the state of Kansas, and I'm counsel for the Kansas Department of Corrections.
All right, thanks. And then Judge Phillip Joni.
Good evening. Thank you. I want to thank KPTS and the sponsors for giving us this opportunity to have a one-to-one conversation with our viewers. Often judicial races are down ballot and also off the radar screen for so many. I've served in the Division I for I'm running for 4th term, so I've been there for 12 years. And it's been quite an experience. I've helped reduce the backlog in the traffic department after serving 5 years there. Now I'm in my 5th year in the family law department. And when we distributed the cases through our new assignment system, I eliminated the backlog of all cases that were more than 12 months old. Right now we're struggling in the courthouse with the pandemic, and I'm working to make our courthouse the safest one in the state.
All right, thank you to all of you for those introductions. Now, here's how we're going to ask the questions. We're going to ask the same question to the two candidates who are competing in the same race. But in order to get more questions in this forum, we will then ask a different question for the next two candidates. The candidates haven't been told what the questions are. They'll have 1 minute to answer, and if their answers are shorter, we can get more questions and answers in. So I'm going to start. I didn't look at this ahead of time, and we're going to start with Judge Sean Hatfield, and then your challenger will get to James Thompson. We'll get to answer the same one. What is the most significant trial experience that you will bring to the bench if you are elected?
Well, that's a great question, Chris. I've been privileged with a broad and balanced experience prior to becoming a judge, both in public and private practice. My first jury trial was a criminal matter. I was a criminal defense attorney, and we got a not guilty verdict in Reno County. My last trial before becoming a judge was a 4-week federal trial. I was part of a prosecution team involved in an opioid case. It's a broad experience, and it's a balanced experience, trying many cases either to a jury or to a bench trial. I'm also experienced with an incredible number of appellate cases, both arguing cases before the Kansas Court of Appeals and the Kansas Supreme Court. That experience gives me a view of a trial level where you get to armchair quarterback and see what mistakes are made. That kind of balanced experience and broad experience is what I bring to the bench.
All right, thanks. Mr. Thompson?
Thank you. I've been practicing for 17 years, and I have practiced in several different areas of the law, mostly in civil rights. I've done numerous jury trials in both the civil side and on the criminal side. I've done bench trials in front of judges at both the state and federal level. So I have a wide range of experience in the courtroom. I have done significant work at the federal level, and I think that my background, my 17 years of experience in multiple areas of the law will shine through when I'm on the bench. Thank you.
All right, and then we're going to go on to the left to those vying for position 1, and to Joni Cole, a challenger. Here's the question. How would you handle making a decision that you feel is legally correct but very unpopular in community opinion, considering that you would later be up for re-election by the same community?
Well, a lot of that is going to be very fact specific, and so that's a very kind of specific question, or a broad question to something that would be very fact specific, I guess. What I think I would do is I would have to look at the law and follow it, because that's what judges are bound to do.
Right. Okay. And Judge Joni, the same question.
It's a great question, and it's a tough thing to answer. I actually had a jury trial that was a, shall we say, a darling of the pro-life movement, being prosecuted for blocking the Muslim center over there off of 96. And the jury found him guilty of the violation. And there was a a lot of people in the front row that I knew personally that were involved in the pro-life movement, and they were trying to convince me through his counsel to overturn the jury's verdict based on his First Amendment right. And I declined to do that. And that led to some controversy in my subsequent race for re-election in 2012. And, you know, I'm still glad I made the right call, and I will do that in the future.
All right. Now back over here, starting with Quentin Pittman, we'd like to ask you this question. What are the most important qualifications and characteristics a person should have to be a good judge?
Well, I think that's a great question. What makes a good judge? A judge should know the law. A judge should follow the law. A judge should have experience. And a judge should make good decisions. I think I have those characteristics, and that's why I'm asking for your vote.
All right. And Judge Monique Centeno, the same question.
What makes a good judge, quite frankly, is experience. I believe that a judge should have civil experience, should also have criminal experience. The more experience you have, the better you can be as a judge when you're deciding decisions. Obviously, you need to know the law. You also need to have a calm temperament. You also need to respect the litigants that argue in front of you. You also need to read the documents intently, take notes, make decisions based upon a law, and also with reasonableness.
All right. Now, the next question we're going to ask, and we're going to start with Mr. Thompson. Oh, okay, that's all right. Hey, we appreciate that. So, what will you do as a district judge to restore and keep the trust of citizens and potential litigants in the legal system?
That's a great question. I think that right now we have a lot of people in our community that are scared of the court system because when you go to court, there's generally something bad happening in your life. Unfortunately, not everybody can afford an attorney, so we have a lot of pro se litigants as well. And I think that we need to reform some of the ways that we do our pro se litigants at the courthouse to give them a better footing when they come to the courthouse. That is better for them. It's also better for the courthouse and better for the attorneys on the other side when you have pro se litigants that have at least a set of guidelines in front of them on how to proceed through the court. I also think that we can look at other specialized courts in the courthouse to help with the management of our court cases. And one of the things I would like to see implemented that has not been implemented here in the state of Kansas at all is a sex trafficking court. I believe at with I-35 coming through our city, we have a thoroughfare of sex trafficking going on, and we need to make sure that we're handling it and we don't blame the victims that are being criminally charged.
All right, very well. Judge, the same question to you, Judge Hatfield.
Well, thank you. That is an excellent question. When you enter the Sedgwick County Courthouse, if you look above the doors in the front, you will see free and independent courts for free and independent people right there above the doors. And it's no coincidence that those words are carved, literally carved into stone. They represent a bedrock principle of our justice system. Every day that I come to work as a district court judge, I am committed to that principle. I'm committed to being a public servant, to being a servant of the law, and to ensuring that everyone who appears in my courtroom, whether they're self-represented or represented by a phalanx of attorneys, knows that their voice and their cause, whether I rule in their favor or not, has been heard. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And now to you, Judge Phillip Joni, and then your challenger with this question. What experience in the years that you have been practicing law uniquely qualifies you to be a good district court judge?
After practicing law for nearly 25 years in this county, I think the most important quality that a judge can have is the ability to listen, to resist the temptation to make up your mind early. I mean, we all have two kids, and you know, when one of them broke the cookie jar, you have to listen to both sides to figure out who did it. The same thing's true in a court case too. You can't make up your mind until you've had an opportunity to listen to both sides and weigh their arguments, weigh the facts, and try to come up with the best decision you possibly can.
All right. And to your challenger, Joni Cole, do you want me to reread the question, or is it you good?
I'm over here, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
For me, it would start with my experience. Being an attorney for 16 years, I've practiced in so many different areas to make myself have such a broad base of knowledge that there's very few things that can come my way that I can't attack, or I can't understand, or I don't know how to handle. And that came from 12 years in private practice, and then for the last 4 years I've been in government service. So I've seen both those sides of a coin, but more so, I've also been a mom for almost 20 years, and that sounds, what the heck does that have to do with being a judge? Well, I'm echoing what my opponent has just said, but that has allowed me to develop patience I never had, kindness, and a willingness to listen to people and try to understand and make good decisions based on what you hear, and let everyone have their day in court.
All right. Now, for our next question to Judge Monique Centeno, why would a member of the public want you to preside over his or her case?
Well, as I mentioned before, I am a district court judge right now. I've been so for about 13 months, so a little over a year. I am known for being respectful to the litigants and the pro se folks who appear in front of me. I'm also known for being patient when people are making oral arguments. I certainly listen intently. I certainly read everything that comes before me. And I also review the law continuously so I can make an educated decision.
All right. And your challenger, Mr. Quentin Pittman, same question.
Someone would want me to hear their case because I have a long history, a long legal experience. I've worked not only in the civil spectrum, but I've worked for the state of Kansas. I worked in criminal law. I've worked in family law, civil law. And so I think the first question that somebody would have would be, is this somebody who has any experience with the area that we're talking about? And I have that experience. I also have an immense trial experience. And so I'm somebody who has probably encountered the problem that's before me, and I'm willing to listen, be patient, and apply the law as written to my decision.
All right. Now I'm going to we'll start down here with Ms. Joni Cole, and then to Judge Joni. What type of law do you find most challenging, and why?
I love this question because there's a lot of ways you can look at it. What do I love, or what is challenging? And sometimes they're the same and sometimes they're not. But in the whole scope of my practice, the most challenging has always been family law, without a doubt. The litigants are in pain, they're in crisis. More often than not, they're fighting over a few pennies, or in some cases their children, and it's a difficult situation. And someone with the right temperament can really help ease that situation and move the case forward.
All right. And to the same question, what type of law do you find most challenging, and why? Judge Joni.
I don't think it's the law that's that challenging. I mean, it's pretty much black letter. Sometimes interpreting the Court of Appeals is a little difficult. But really, it's just like what Joni said. It's dealing with the people. The reality is that in family law, I have to somehow turn the family discord into a discourse and help facilitate them to realize that they have to co-parent for the benefit of their children. I have seen time and again parents attempt to alienate the affection of the child from the other one. I have seen them try to hide assets, or it just goes on and on and on. And every day, that's the challenge, to try to get people to learn to live apart but still get along.
Oh, I can understand that. All right. Well, we're coming back here, and we'll start with Judge. No, or do we? Oh, wait a minute. Did you get a? We haven't got to you. I apologize for this question. I'll start with Judge Sean Hatfield. Judicial temperament. It's a phrase that we often hear when discussing an individual's qualifications to be a judge. Do you believe that you have the required temperament to serve as a Sedgwick County District Court judge, and why?
Absolutely. Temperament is vital. It's a vital quality, perhaps even the number one quality for a judge. The ability to listen, the ability to put aside any personal bias or predilection, to hear the arguments from both sides. As I mentioned earlier, my broad experience and balanced experience, being able to bring that experience, knowing both sides of the argument and meticulously preparing before oral arguments or before a hearing to ensure that each litigant, each person is heard and heard fairly. That is temperament. And to be able to do that in a calm and respectful manner on issues that are in sometimes life or death, the most important things in the world for the people that are appearing in front of you. It's a vital quality. It's a great question.
All right. Mr. Thompson?
I think that temperament is probably the most important quality for a judge, because we have to sit there and listen to what is being told to us. We have to hear people at their absolute worst times in their lives and remain calm and professional in doing so. Anybody that knows me knows that I'm a friendly person. They know that I care about my community and that I listen and that I try to help whenever I can. As judge, it means not only listening, but also making hard decisions, sometimes decisions that you don't want to make, but the law is the law and you have to follow what's written. So I think that I have a great temperament for being judge.
All right. Now, Judge Monique Centeno, here's a question for you and then to your challenger. Do you agree with the way the state court system has responded to COVID-19? Is there anything more or less that you would do if you were in charge?
Well, what I can equate that to.
Passing on to others too to get a question, because it's so broad and it's so timely, isn't it?
Absolutely. Well, you know, I was extremely happy when Governor Kelly issued out an order saying that we have to wear masks. I was appreciative when the Department of Health got on TV and told everyone, yes, using masks and having 6 feet of distance, social distancing is appropriate. If I narrow it down to the court system itself, certainly we have taken a lot of precautions to make sure that everyone is safe that comes into the courtroom. For the first month or so, we were doing video conferences or telephone conferences. I did a lot of those. I have made adjustments to my courtroom on my own dollar to make sure that everyone is safe.
All right. Mr. Pittman, similar question to you. Is there anything more or less you would do if you were in charge when it comes to the state court, how the state court system has responded to COVID-19?
Well, Chris, my biggest concern is the fact that many litigants, many people who have cases at the courthouse are not getting their cases heard. COVID has slowed that down. We've got the suspension of speedy trial. We've got cases essentially happening 1 an hour, which means people have waited months in order to get into the courthouse. And I think that our biggest concern should be getting those people into court one way or the other and getting those cases heard.
And I want to continue this question because of one, it's so timely, and we do have the time. I want to hear from the others here how you feel about the same thing. So Judge Hatfield, if I could, do you agree with the way the state court system has responded to COVID-19? Is there anything else more or less that you would do? Are you seeing an impact on just how it impacts the judicial system here in Kansas?
Well, certainly there's an impact, and it impacts all of our dockets, not just here in Sedgwick County. but across the state, unique in Sedgwick County, we have such a caseload in comparison to the rest of the state. But really, at the courthouse, the unsung heroes throughout all of this have been the courthouse staff, our court administrator, our IT, our clerks, who have worked tirelessly to ensure that there is a way to move forward and to implement those important protocols that we've received at the state level. We've outfitted our courtrooms with plexiglass in some of them. We're doing innovative things just now with jury trials, but it's really, frankly, all part and due to incredibly hard work by the courthouse staff implementing those plans that we've received from the Supreme Court and others.
Yeah, Mr. Thompson, can you think of other things, or what would you do differently, or if you had the ability to change it?
I think echoing one of the concerns that Quentin had is getting the huge number of people through the courthouse, because everything has slowed down. So I'd probably like to see some more online court and some night court as well. I think that those two things could help lessen the burden on the community as they're trying to get their cases heard, as they're going through these hardships in their life. It creates a significant hardship, though, on the county in doing that, and on the judges and on the clerks and everybody else. But these are uncertain times. This is not unusual. We've never seen anything like this. So I think the best thing that we can do, though, and I think that we are doing that as a community for the most part, is come together, try to recognize these are hard times, try to be as patient as we can, but look for innovative ways like a night court, more online courts, to try to push those cases through and get them through the system.
All right. Maybe down here to Judge Joni, what would you do differently, or do you agree with the way the state?
I remember the question. Remember the question. Okay.
Yeah.
So, February 15th, I'm emailing the administrative judge, sending articles going like, this is going to be bad. It's already here. What are we going to do? I looked at the first Supreme Court plan for the state, and I said, all we're going to do is turn our building into an infection vector. And the plexiglass is a good first start. But I think the best thing we can do in the courthouse to ensure it's as safe as possible is have a multi-layer defense against the virus. And that would mean installing air sterilization systems. I mean, you're the airplane reporter in the out, and so you remember the guys that are building the retrofit kits for commercial airliners.
Right.
And they're also doing similar systems in restaurants in New York City, where they use UV spectrum C lights to sterilize the air. They clean the air in the room every 30 seconds. And if we're going to have, who are our jurors? The jurors are usually retired because they don't have to work, and they're elderly like me, and so they're in a high-risk category, and we need to make the building as safe as possible. I think the plexiglass is a good first start, and I'm trying to convince the county managers and stuff to look at this system because they're relatively cheap. The light bulbs are inexpensive. They don't use very much electricity, and I think the real worry is to keep the courthouse from looking like the movie Brazil, but with all the ductwork.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, Joni, yourself on the same question. Because some of this comes down to political things too. When we're talking about the legislature maybe needing to send more money down, if it's going to cost the courts more, or the county. The county upping with the money for these things. So yourself, how do you look at it?
Well, and my client is largely the state right now, and so for me, it's not that the things that I do, I keep doing even though court's not open right now. But as someone who was in private practice for a long time, I have tried to envision what I would do differently as a judge under these circumstances. And every single one of these answers are brilliant. And I think all of those things need to come together and happen, but money is always the issue when you're dealing with the government and the state. And so for me, initially, my thoughts were expand those dockets, figure out what can be handled via electronically, and keep doing that. If it has to be a jury trial, which aren't always as frequent as you might think, figure out a way to structure that courtroom in a way that could maximize safety for the litigants.
Right. Right. And because, like you say, these are uncertain times. And there's the issue always of a speedy trial. And you can't, how do you balance, Judge Hatfield, how do you balance the speedy trial issue with some of these things where the courts have to be slowed down? What do you do? There is no speedy trial. Yeah.
Well, and Chris, if you forgive me, I'm not going to get into speedy trial just because it is likely going to be an issue that our judges are going to have to address here and across the state. But it is a valid concern. Our district attorney, Mark Bennett, has been in the news raising those important issues with regard to getting those cases tried. I really, though, have to commend, again, our courthouse staff, Chief Judge Gearing, in getting these jury trials going, getting our courtrooms in, at least a couple of our courtrooms, in a position that complies with our state guidelines to get those trials moving. And they're going to be a priority, and we're adapting and we're moving forward.
All right. Now here's another question that we may be able to get all of you involved in. District court judges, we'll start, wait, I think we're to start right here with Mr. Thompson. We'll start right here.
All right.
And then go around this way. District court judges in Kansas are subject to certain canons of judicial ethics. If you observe a fellow member of the bench committing what you know or believe to be a violation of those judicial canons, would you be willing to report them? Why or why not?
Well, I think that to have a transparent government, to have a transparent judiciary, to have faith in our judges, we have to be willing to make those hard decisions and stand up and report that judge if they're doing something that's unethical. That's part of being an attorney. That's part of being a judge. That's what we swear to do when we take that oath, when we get sworn in. I've been practicing for 17 years, and there's been a couple of times where I've had to make that hard decision to report another attorney for something that I felt was a violation. It's not something that any attorney takes lightly, but it's something that sometimes you have to do, because if we don't police ourselves, if we don't keep people in the loop as far as being able to see what's going on and see that we do police ourselves, then we're going to have a community that loses all faith in us and loses faith in our judiciary and our attorneys. So I think that we don't have any choice but to report a violation.
Judge Hatfield.
Well, to answer your question very frankly is yes. And it is built into the rules of professional conduct and the judicial canons that we have to do so if we witness a violation. But I will say that we have one of the most learned and brilliant and committed benches, I think, in the state. Our judges are excellent here and across the state. I don't think that's a concern. I've never seen it. And I'm proud to serve with our judges, and I look forward to continuing to serve with them.
All right. Challenger Joni Cole, a question for you and then for Judge Joni. What is your biggest accomplishment as an attorney? How would you qualify that and talk about your biggest accomplishment as an attorney?
Well, I'm sorry, was that you? Are you first or am I?
I think it's your turn.
Okay.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
I heard you move, so I thought maybe I jumped in too soon.
Is
Sorry.
it Judge Joni?
I'll be glad to.
Well, okay, we'll
no
do
problem.
it. Yeah, after asking all these questions, I forget who's first and who's on second.
I understand. 3 years before Mr. Thompson was admitted to the bar, I quit counting at 50,000 cases. Helping people is the greatest accomplishment. Whether it's working to try to change the law or help them get their driving privileges restored so they can get their lives back on track, or working with domestic violence victims and trying to improve the statute or improve our sentencing system so that it reduces recidivism. Those are the things that I've helped accomplish in some form, and I'm working to create and accomplish in the future.
All right, thank you. And Joan, Ms. Cole?
Well, everybody has war stories if they've practiced law for any duration. And I've had some really big cases that lasted years and spanned states and that I'm really proud of. But I think just the little cases are the ones where maybe I didn't make a huge fee or anything, but where I really put extra effort in and made a really good impact on somebody that really needed help. The one that always stands out in my mind, and this is one of my favorite stories, was about a young lady who came to me, and she was being evicted from her apartment. And this was the second time in the span of a year where I had to help her not get evicted from her apartment. And so I took that extra time with her and just asked the right questions, and come to find out the reason she kept not paying her rent is because she was being garnished. So I took an extra trip down to the courthouse and pulled the file and looked at it and discovered a legal judgment. And then I took the next step, and they were garnishing her in violation of state law. The law I didn't know about, but it was one of those that kept you up at night, and a little extra effort got her every dollar back.
Okay. All right, now we're going to start back over here. And here's a question that I think a lot about, because like some of you, I've been around a while, and I remember before the courts had cameras in the courtroom. And I remember it was a battle in each state whether they could have cameras in the court, and then cameras being only on certain cases. And sometimes there are rules, of course, that some people can keep the camera from being on them. So starting with back over here with Quentin Pittman, what about cameras in the courtroom? Is it a good idea, a bad idea? What do you think? Or do you just roll with it because, hey, after all, it is the law?
I don't think cameras in the courtroom are a bad idea. You know, we always hear people want to know more about our courts, know about what's going on, and yet they never come to the courthouse. I'm in the courthouse almost every day, all day long. Rarely do I see anybody in there, but I really think broadcasting online is a great idea. And I'll echo something that Jim has said, and that's transparency. And I think if you want to build a relationship with the community, be as transparent as you can. That's a great idea.
All right. Judge Monique Centeno, your thoughts on cameras in the courtroom? After all, you know, the federal courts, they can't, they still don't. And so a lot of times you have these artists. I remember as a journalist for years having to get an artist down there with you, and man, sometimes they struggled with getting the art down correctly, and whenever you put a news story on. But what about cameras in the courtroom? Is it something that helps bridge the understanding to the public? Your thoughts?
Absolutely. I think that it provides transparency. We need that in the courtroom. A lot of times we hear articles or stories in the news about what's happening in court, but you only get a snippet of what happens in court. If we were able to have cameras in the courtroom all the time, the entire community would know what would happen in the courtroom all the time. And that's the point. The courtroom is a public place. And so I think that anything that informs the public more about what we do in court is awesome. So I welcome them.
Okay. Now, I've got a question that I really want everyone to have a chance to weigh in on. And we'll start with Judge Hatfield, I believe. Is that correct? Or is it if we're...
I'll take it.
Okay. All right. And everyone, you'll get a chance to weigh in on this. We have the time, and I think the public wants to ask this question. In recent weeks and months, there have been protests in the streets in many American cities, among other issues challenging the fairness of the judicial process. The Lady Justice statue is blindfolded, as we know. What will or can you do as a judge to assure the public of fairness and equity in your courtroom? And again, this will be something that everyone gets a chance to weigh in on.
Well, that answer goes back to, that question goes back to answers I think we've all addressed here with regard to demeanor, that quality of a judge. I talked earlier about free and independent courts and free and independent people. That's, again, carved into our courthouse. We need judges who are committed to that principle, who know how to stay in their lane, that aren't there to be advocates, They aren't there to be legislators, but to apply the law fairly and impartially, without bias, without personal predilection. And it's important for the people that appear before our judges to know that that is a quality that the judge holds dear and is committed to each and every time somebody is in front of them in the courthouse. That's how we start building that trust and going to the community and communicating that this is what our judges are here to do, to be fair and impartial, and no matter who you are, you're going to get a fair shake and your voice is going to be heard in that courtroom.
Mr. Thompson.
I think it's a great question, and I think it's something that has to be addressed. Before you can fix any problem, you have to admit that there is a problem. And we do have a problem with our criminal justice system. We can see systemic racism through statistics. I think what the judicial system can do is be cognizant of that and be on the lookout to make sure that we remain unbiased, to make sure that there is no bias being put forth either in the charging of cases, in the defending of cases, the prosecution of cases, in the juries, or even within our own selves. We have to make sure that we are aware of bias in our system because we know that there is. We can see the statistics. But I think that our judiciary will do a good job of addressing that. I know that I am looking forward to getting there and helping to address that. So I think that that is the best way, again, to make sure that we are impartial, that we are fair, that the community has faith in us to decide the cases based on the facts and not based on some bias that we may or may not have.
Okay. And then this similar question to you, Judge Joni, because, I mean, after all, sometimes the questions in the public, it may be at a different level than what it comes to the bench, but we're talking about the judicial system. Maybe it's the prosecuting level that sometimes these questions get raised about, well, there's not fairness, this isn't fair, this wasn't fair. But that's for you maybe in part to explain.
Thank you. As a judge that has served on the bench here in Sedgwick County for a dozen years now, I've had the benefit of some of the finest training and education in the United States. I've attended the National Judicial College in Reno, Nevada for weeks of training. And a significant segment of that was helping us learn how to identify the inherent bias every person has, and to also identify the confirmation bias, for example, that we all deal with every day in social media. And then once you identify it, that's how you counter it. Because if you don't identify it, the bias takes over. So being able to identify that and that training is absolutely critical. And that kind of training should be expanded throughout the entire criminal justice system for law enforcement, prosecutors, and defense attorneys.
Okay. Ms. Cole.
And I agree with all of that 110%. I'll just add, training is absolutely key. I don't think I could say it better, truly. But also, and temperament, those two together were literally the perfect answers. I'll just add that I think that keying into those opportunities to be aware of those things are critical to a judge maintaining that bias. Because if I practiced all over and I've got the wonderful opportunity to meet lots of different judges and lots of different lawyers, but I'm really not buddies with anybody. I don't drink with anybody. I don't hang out. And what you find, I think, is, and what I think especially other lawyers see is there's bias, sometimes with gender, there's bias with race. And it takes someone who's willing to really work hard to identify where those things exist and give everybody a fair shot.
Oh. All right, Judge Centeno, the same question to you. What if you hear something outside your courtroom there on Main Street or on Central Avenue, and maybe it has to do with that? Do you have to block that out, or because these are questions? There is unrest in a lot of American cities, and Wichita could be one of those, and we've seen some even in recent months.
Yeah, well, as an African American, obviously I am extremely sensitive to the subject. I myself have experienced racial discrimination professionally and personally. So I know what it feels like, and I know what it feels like to not be heard or to push to the side because you don't look like everyone else in the room. I think that makes me even more sensitive to fairness. What I do in my courtroom is I make sure that I look at both of my litigants in the eye. When I make a ruling and make a decision based upon a law, I look them in the eye and I tell them exactly why I made this decision and where they can improve next time. Because I am a family court judge, oftentimes I have cases or people who come back to me. So I think it is confronting it head on and treating everyone fairly in your courtroom.
Mr. Pittman, your thoughts?
Well, I'm not sure what I can add, except I would say this. One of the problems that concerns me is the lack of representation that I see in lots of litigants who go to the courthouse now. We've touched on it before about the amount of pro se litigants, and I think that those are the people that we need to be hypersensitive to, because I don't believe that they don't have the legal training or the background. And so I think when you encounter one of those individuals, you need to go the extra mile to make sure that they understand what the law is and how it's being applied to their situation.
All right, and this next question that's presented to me to ask, and it may seem similar, but there are dissimilarities also. So starting with you, Mr. Thompson, our country is in a crisis right now about race. How will you help prevent racial bias in your own courtroom?
I think that goes back to my answer from a few moments ago, that knowing that there's a problem and being aware of it and looking for it and making sure that, as Judge Centeno said, addressing it head on. It's not something that should be tolerated in the courtroom. It's not something that should be a part of any judicial decision. And we just have to recognize that there is an issue out there, move forward and address it. And I don't really know of any other way to do it other than that. Just recognize that there's a problem and face it head on.
All right. Judge Hatfield?
I'll be very brief with this.
Yeah.
Racial bias is not tolerated in my courtroom. Everyone that comes before me will be heard, regardless of race, gender. We're there to apply the law, to call the balls and strikes. And it's just as simple as that, Chris. Racial discrimination and injustice has no place in our courtrooms, and it has no place in mine.
Yet we're hearing in the country that is brought into question whenever it comes to whether some charges are brought against persons or whether charges are not. And again, that may be at a different level, but I think that's why the public, I think, have those questions in their mind. Ms. Cole, your thoughts. How would you make sure racial bias doesn't enter your courtroom? And not just racial bias, but could be gender bias or other biases.
As a judge, you just have to work hard to develop an act to eliminate those biases in your own personal disposition. When you're talking about, this came up on a Zoom call we had the other day when we were talking about sentencing guidelines, and I think you alluded to the fact that some of these things occur on a lower level when we're talking about like racial discrimination in sentencing or things like that. That actually, I'm not saying it can occur on the judicial level, but it starts at a much lower level. So there's a whole lot of things that have to be taken into consideration to make sure that those don't occur, whether they're implicit or whether they're direct. And it starts with education and training.
All right, Judge Joni?
Thank you. I'd like to add a little bit to my previous answer to recognize that we all have biases. We all do. And so what do we do in response to that? Whether you're a judge or a law enforcement officer or an attorney or a prosecutor or you know, just the teacher in the classroom. The answer is training and being able to recognize that bias and then set up a structure that will counter it, neutralize it, and then move on with the answer to the question that's before you.
All right. Now, Mr. Pittman, I believe we're back to you.
Well, I think everybody says that, you know, these are great answers, and if they see bias, they'll do something about it. You know, there's plenty of case law that applies to what I think is the major source of frustration, which is criminal law. And that applies to pretext stops, where people believe that they're pulled over because of their particular color. And I think that if you're a judge and you recognize that those situations are occurring, you know, you have the ability to dismiss, or you have the ability to find that it's a pretext stop, and the evidence that was acquired could be suppressed. And, you know, I see that very infrequently. And I think that's something that needs to change.
All right, thank you. And Judge Monique Centeno, again, how will you help prevent racial bias in your courtroom?
I think that it all comes down to treating everyone the same. Because quite frankly, in my courtroom, I'm the decider. There is no jury there. So I give all of the litigants the same exact amount of time to make their arguments. I politely respond to their objections whenever they're made. I make sure that everyone has enough time to make their arguments, particularly if they're pro se, to convince me of whatever it is that they're trying to convince me of. I think once you treat people all the same, the racial bias that you may have evaporates.
And is the law clear enough? Can't you just go by the law, what's written in the law, and you know, ignore maybe the things that you see? After all, the Lady Justice is supposed to be blindfolded, so that's the thought. So starting with Judge Sean Hatfield, what about the other attorneys? How can judges help improve the quality of the Wichita Bar?
Well, Wichita Bar is famous, and I think everybody here tonight will agree. Wichita's Bar is famous for its collegiality. We hear that a lot. And one of the difficulties, particularly with COVID, is we don't have that opportunity to interact at the courthouse together as we often do before a hearing, sometimes back in chambers with judge. It's important. It's a little thing, Chris, but to have two attorneys adamantly opposed to each other on an issue, to be able to sometimes come back and say hello to the judge and swap war stories, and that goes a long, long way to improving the overall environment at the courthouse. And it's something to be cognizant about, especially during COVID, and going out of our way to continue to be collegial.
Yeah, I have to admit, as a reporter in courtrooms since my college days, I've admired that, and it used to puzzle me. How can they go at each other's throat in the courtroom and then, okay, it's all, you won, I lost, and then go on with it? But what can you do? What would you suggest, things that the judges can suggest to improve the attorneys that are on the other side?
Well, I think that we can look for teachable moments with the attorneys that are in front of us as a judge. I know that in my personal experience, we used to have a judge on the bench, Judge Eric Yost. He's a fabulous judge. And I tried my very first jury trial in front of him. And when the jury trial was over, I had won. I went back to my office, and about a day later, my boss, who had been practicing, his name was Ed Dwyer, had been practicing here for a long time, came and said, "Hey, I got a note from the judge that said, I just had your young associate in front of me for a jury trial. I just want you to know you're going to have one heck of a litigator there." And that made my day. To be recognized by the judge really resounded with me and stuck in my mind 17 years later. So I think that we can do those types of things to encourage young litigators when they're doing well, to pull them aside when they're not, to give them encouragement to move forward.
All right. Ms. Cole, we'll make this quicker as we're getting close to the end of the program. So
Sure, and I'm just going to follow Jim on that and just say lead from the front, because you're the judge and you set the stage for whether things go good or whether things go bad. In my experience, I have worked with all kinds of attorneys, and one thing that, even just as an observer, that just gets me a little riled up is when attorneys do not treat each other with the respect that they deserve. They may not like their clients, they may not like their legal positions, but there's a certain level of camaraderie and courtesy that is required, and I will make sure that happens.
Judge Joni?
In the 12 years I've been a judge, and at the time as an attorney, I've taught dozens and dozens of continuing legal education seminars and continuing judicial education seminars. I think that bringing the level of the bar's knowledge up, particularly when it comes to changes in the statutes that come with each legislative session, are really important. And so, I think the light out says I need to be quiet, so we'll see.
All right. Well, hey, I apologize. This may indicate that time is running out, so we'll have to suspend it from here because we are running out of time. So we have run out of time. We hope you've learned not only about these judicial candidates, but got questions answered which would help you in your own county judicial races. We thank the Wichita Women Attorneys Association and the League of Women Voters for helping us with this forum. A reminder, if you vote by mail, please follow the instructions carefully and meet the mailing deadline. Otherwise, we'll see you at the polls November 3rd. Thanks again for watching. I'm your host, Chris Frank.
Martin Pringle Attorneys at Law is a proud supporter of the Wichita Women's Attorneys Association, the League of Women's Voters, and KPTS as hosts of the Judicial Candidate Forum, a community event with the goal of introducing judicial candidates and informing Sedgwick County voters. Also made possible by Hite, Fanning, and Honeyman LLP, business-minded and trial-ready attorneys with decades of success. This candidate forum was initiated and planned with the help of the Wichita Women's Attorneys Association and the League of Women Voters, Wichita Metro.